Hey guys, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. For some of you this might be a welcome back, because this is actually a channel that I've had for a couple of years, and I've recently decided to, it's kind of just like a lifestyle channel that I hadn't really uploaded a whole lot on, because I've decided to just consolidate all of that stuff over on my main channel. But anyway, I've decided recently to turn this channel into an unofficial book slash reading themed channel instead, because it is a newfound sort of rediscovered love of mine in the last couple of years. And I don't know, like, I love watching booktube and all things that are like book related, book reviews, book recaps, TBRs, everything. And I don't really have anyone in my real life who's as voracious as a reader as I am, or like reads maybe the selection of books similar to me to discuss and talk about all the book things. It's usually just my husband, but he doesn't actually read the book, so he just kind of listens to me talk about the books. So I just thought, you know, the best way to start on any kind of social media platform is to talk about something that you're passionate about and that you love. On my main channel, I'm mostly talking about like motherhood and homeschooling, things like that. And so I thought that I would dedicate this channel to reading and books. So here we are. So if you're new, I would love it if you would subscribe. If you're not new and you're returning and you're kind of like, what is going on? Now you know, and I'm hoping that you'll decide to stay, but I'd love to meet some new online friends who also love all things books and reading. So in today's video, I thought I would do my first, I guess, January recap. How many books I read in January, and kind of go through them and what I thought and my rating. And then also at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about my February TBR and what plans I have loosely for that, because I'm very much so a mood reader. I do usually have some books on my radar though that I want to get to that month, but it kind of just depends on what I'm in the mood for. But we're going to start with the books that I read in January, and I actually don't have any physical copies here because they were all loans from the library that I got from Libby. So they were either the books or the audiobooks. So I read 5 books in January. I'm just going to go through them in order of reading them. The first book that I read was the ever popular Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. If you are into books at all, then I'm sure you've heard of this book. It's everywhere. In fact, I couldn't even get my hands on a physical copy if I wanted to, because it is literally sold out everywhere. But I was able to secure a copy on Libby. That was one of the first books I read in the new year. I had no clue what it was about. I was gonna mention is I like not really knowing. I mean, usually I go into a book and I have some idea. Is it a romance or, you know, a thriller or sci-fi, whatever. But I like not really knowing, because I find more times than not the back of the book, the synopsis gives away like way too much. I guess this would just be considered like general fiction. Book is basically about these two characters, Sam and, I have to look it up, Sam and Sadie. Okay, Sam and Sadie. You feel like you are reading an entire lifetime of these two characters, because it kind of flip-flops back and forth, past and present, and you see where they are now, but you also get glimpses of them from the past, in their childhood, how they met, kind of the role that they have in each other's lives, the very much complicated relationship that they have with each other. It's like they love each other, but in a very, I don't know, it seems like missed opportunity sort of way a lot of the time. They become fast friends when they are children. They meet in a hospital because he is there receiving therapy, and he's going through multiple surgeries after being in a car accident. She's there because her sister is in and out of the hospital with cancer. And so they end up meeting in sort of the kids' common room. The nurses end up like telling her mom that she is the first person that has got him to talk pretty much to anybody since he's been at the hospital. They basically are encouraging her to continue to visit with him and build a friendship with him, to get him to socialize and to talk. But aside from that, like, they are building their own friendship on the side anyway. And part of their friendship is built on the fact that they both love video games and they're playing like Nintendo, because this is like old school, you know. And so that's where their friendship builds. And then from there, you come to the present where they, you know, they go to school together, and then they decide that they're going to design, create their own video games. And so there is a lot of video game talk. I wouldn't say I'm not an avid video game player, but the throwbacks to when they're kids and playing all those like classic Nintendo games and arcade games was just like such a blast from the past. I don't know, it was just so reminiscent of my own childhood. So yes, it is heavy on the video game talk, and I've heard a lot of people say that that was the reason that they didn't necessarily love it, or they didn't enjoy like how much talk there was of that. But it's so integral to the story of who they are and what connects them that I feel like it's more than just video games. Like, yes, it's the theme. It's a theme in the book, but it's so much more about relationship and character development and just seeing the ups and downs of their friendship, various relationships with them and other people surrounding them as well, and kind of just seeing where their life takes them. The thing that I loved most about it was how real they felt. I just felt like at times they are characters that you could hate, but it's because they're so flawed and felt so real, and you kind of empathize a lot with them throughout the book. It was definitely like up and down. There were times where I was kind of like, what in the world? And it's a pretty long book, like it's a pretty hefty book, but there's just so much information packed into it and so much detail, and you really, like I said, you really do get attached to the characters. I mean, they're the main characters, but there's also some like side characters. I cried. There's times where I laughed. It's frustrating. It makes you angry, like all the emotions. Anyway, all in all, I don't like, I've thought about it more since I've read it. Wanted to make sure that my rating held up, but I did give it 5 out of 5 stars. I would say I would still rate it that. I thought it was fantastic. So definitely a great start to 2023. The next book that I read was All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. Let me start off by saying I listened to this on audiobook. I flew through it really fast. I usually listen to my audiobooks on a pretty fast speed, but I didn't find this book was very long. I finished it in like a couple of days. I would just listen to it on like walks and stuff. When it comes to like mystery thrillers, not like the primary genre that I read, but I have read quite a few. And with the exception of The Silent Patient, I mean, whether you loved it or not, I did not see that ending coming. I did not see that plot twist at all, at all, at all, at all. As of now, that's the only book that's truly thrown me for a loop. I feel like when I go into all these other books, I can usually, pretty early on, I could usually figure out what the twist is going to be, or like the whodunit, and most of the time I'm right. Now sometimes there'll be multiple twists and I might not get like every single one, but for the most part, I don't know. I don't really try very hard to try to guess them. That in itself kind of makes me usually give it a little bit of a lower rating. I kind of feel disappointed if I've guessed it early on. That's kind of how I felt. I didn't guess like every part of the reveal because there was like multiple layers to it, but the general idea of it I did. It was pretty fast paced. The only parts that I found a little boring was whenever they were going back into the past. It kind of dragged on a little bit, but basically the premise of the story is that there's this woman, and one day she wakes up, she has like I think he's 2 or maybe he's younger than 2, I don't remember now, and she goes to check on him in the morning. Like she's thinking he's just slept in. She finally goes in to check on him in the crib in the morning, and he's gone. Like he's missing from the crib. Now it's like a year later. Her and her husband have divorced, and basically her life is in shambles, but they've kind of run into a dead end as far as figuring out what happened to him, and the investigation is kind of fizzled out. But she is continuing to just feel like she wants some answers. Her husband, on the other hand, is kind of like, you need to just put this to rest. And so she has actually become like, she sort of kind of talks about her story. She goes on a lot of like crime podcasts, and she travels and does that kind of thing. And And she does that thinking to herself like that she just wants to keep the story going. She doesn't want people to forget about the story. She wants it to be very much in people's minds so that they can come to some conclusion of what has happened to her son, and she's still holding out hope that he can be found alive. The ending was a little underwhelming. It's basically how I rate my books, because I know that everybody rates books differently. For me, it's like if I give a book a 5-star, I'm giving it based on how I felt while reading the book. Did I enjoy it? You know, overall, how did I feel? Because I find that it's very subjective. I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. Honestly, that was probably kind of generous because I literally forgot about it as soon as I finished reading it. In fact, whenever I've come in to look at my Goodreads list and I see it sitting there, I'm like, what is this book about? Until I open up the synopsis again, and then I'm like, oh yeah, it's that one. It was less than memorable. It has a 4.5-star rating on Goodreads, so maybe I'm just being super harsh, but I don't know. I feel like I've read better. The next book that I read was The Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. This is the first Emily St. John Mandel book that I've ever read, and the only reason why I was even, I mean, I know that her books are popular, but the only reason why I was even on my radar, I've heard Books and Lala talk about her a lot. That's kind of where I caught wind of it at all. I mean, I've seen her books, but have no clue. I didn't even know like what genre it was. I didn't even know what at all, anything about her books. Looking at the covers of them and the titles, I was clueless. I had no idea. But there was a copy available at my local library. It's not very long, so I was like, you know what, let me just try something new. I was pleasantly surprised. I actually thought I was not gonna like it. I don't know why, but I thought the fact that I didn't understand what she even wrote about was going to make me feel like, okay, this is just not for me, which I know sounds silly, but I ended up giving it well, on Goodreads, I gave it a 4 out of 5. I'd probably give it, you can't give half stars on Goodreads, so, but I would probably give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I don't really quite know how to explain though what the book is about. First quarter of the book, I was so confused. And at that point I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna like this. I didn't understand anything that was happening. Every like chapter was a new character with their own story that did not have anything to do with what you had just read prior. They were all taking place in different times, like everywhere from like, I think it was the 1800s all the way to the future, like 2033 or something like that. And I was just very confused as to what was happening and what was going on. About the halfway point of the book, it started to make sense, and I started to understand, like you finally start to see what the connection is between all of the characters. Would this be considered sci-fi? I'm not even really sure what the book would be considered, but it has a lot to do with time travel. I will say that. So there's a lot of past and present and time travel, which I've never read about before. So that one's The Sea of Tranquility. I know she has Station 11 and what's the other one called? The Glass Hotel. I know that I had heard that it's kind of good if you can read those other ones first. I understand why, because even though I didn't read them, I picked out that there was a few references in The Sea of Tranquility from those other books, but I don't necessarily think it made it any more confusing than it was. Like, I don't think you have to. It's kind of like, you know, when you have an author and they kind of nods to other books in one of their books, it's kind of like that, but you don't have to read the other books necessarily. I enjoyed it more than I thought, and I think I may go back and read some of her other books. So yeah. And the next book I read was Just the Nicest Couple by Mary Kubica. She is the same author that wrote Local Woman Missing, which I actually, yep, I have it right here on my shelf. I haven't read that one yet. Tell me if you've read them both. I actually think there is a nod to that book and maybe some characters in that book in Just the Nicest Couple. This was another one that I say unfortunately, I pretty much guessed what was going on. There's actually 3 POVs. So you have these 2 couples. One couple, they're very wealthy. He is like a surgeon. She's a teacher. And then you have this other couple. I don't remember what the husband does, but the wife is also a teacher. So they work at the same school. So they know each other. They're kind of friends. The rich couples, the husband goes missing. They had a fight and he walks out and then he doesn't come home. At first she thinks like, oh, you know, like we've had this fight and now he's upset and maybe he's crashed on like at a friend's house or he's at a hotel or whatever. Days and days and days start to go by. She doesn't see anything on like credit card statements or on the bank account that he's been using money for anything. And then his work calls and saying he's not even showing up for surgeries and stuff. Now she's starting to get worried. She's not sure what's going on. And they had originally been fighting because he was upset. Her mom, who is like, she's been losing her eyesight. She has like a degenerative disease. And so she's been spending a lot of time with her mom and taking her to appointments and like just kind of like hanging out with her mom. And I guess they're fighting about that. And she thinks like, oh, he's just mad or whatever. And she's like, maybe he's like actually left me. So it's basically like this mystery trying to solve the fact that like he has gone missing and what's happened to him. Has he left or is he actually missing? And then as far as this other couple goes, I don't want to give away too much, but I will say that the wife of this other couple was one of the last people to see him before he disappeared, unofficially disappeared. They get tangled up in this mess and there's a lot of just like, it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. Getting, you know, both women's point of views and also the one husband, not the missing husband, the other husband, who's trying to figure out how to clear up this mess. It was interesting. It was really fast paced. It was very interesting and it was a fun read. Like I said, I did kind of figure out a little bit of it. The ending was kind of neat. I thought the twists were pretty good. All in all, like it was a fun time. I gave this, well, on Goodreads, I gave it a 4, a generous 4-star. I would say it was more like a 3.5, maybe like a 3.75 star, but I did enjoy it. And I would say it was a fun mystery, a lot of twists, a lot of turns. Yeah, it was good. And the last book that I read in January was Spare by Prince Harry. Ever since, even before it was even like officially out, people were talking about it. Of course, there's been a lot of just hoopla around the whole royal family and Prince Harry and Meghan and that whole thing going on there. I'm not necessarily like obsessed with the royal family. I know an average amount of information. So I watched like years ago when they did the Oprah special. I did watch that. Probably it was like at the end of last year, like just before Christmas. I finally watched the special that they have on Netflix, which I don't know, are they doing a season 2 of that? Like, I'm not sure, but anyway, I did watch that. It is very intriguing. You know, I think part of it is just such a, it's such a like world that is so separate from, it doesn't even feel like real life. The whole royal family and just everything that takes place within the royal family just seems so not real life to me anyway. So it's very interesting to read about that, to find out about that just in general. A lot of things I did not know. For instance, the title of the book, I mean, I'm not giving anything away. I did not even know this when I read the book because he talks about it very early on in the book, but I guess this is common knowledge because when I told my husband, he was like, yeah, you never knew that? And I was like, why? First of all, how is this common knowledge? How is everybody just like, yeah, this is just how it is? And how is this not a bigger deal? The fact that he's literally referred to as the spare because Prince William was born first, so he is the next in line, or like the first in line to the throne as far as they go. And basically Prince Harry is the spare. If anything happens to William, or, you know, like they were talking about like if he needed like a blood transfusion or anything like that, that they would literally have a spare. That just threw me for a loop. Not just that, but the fact that they use that term so casually, because the thing is, it's not even just like a term that like the paparazzi uses. According to Prince Harry, that is something the royal family even like refers to him as. Everybody has their own take on the whole story. I'm not necessarily gonna say whether I believe all of it or whose side I'm on. That's neither here or there. I think everybody, you know, especially when it's a memoir, you're obviously telling your side of the story, right? Like you're telling the story from your perspective, from how you lived it on your side of life, you know, and what your experience was. So I don't know what I have to say about, and like I'm not going to comment on that, but there's this part of me that as I was reading it, I actually read it, and then I also had the audiobook of it, so it was kind of neat. I actually ended up listening to the audiobook more than reading it. Yeah, I just found myself listening to it and thinking like, okay, yes, there's like aspects of this where it's like there's the royal family and there's all the pomp and circumstance and just the traditions that have been passed down that are just part of what they do, whether it makes sense to us or not. And there's like that other side where I'm like, okay, but these are like people, you know, like these are human beings, these are people. And I was just like, I can't imagine referring to one of my kids as the spare and them like growing up with that label. Like just, I was a little bit, can you tell? I was floored by that whole thing. I still am. I think the thing that just struck me the most was there's so much more going on that I just was like not aware of. And you know, basically the whole, again, I know this is his side of the story, but overall idea that like they have struck this unofficial agreement with the paparazzi. Okay, the paparazzi will write a certain way or withhold certain information if the royal family cooperates with them, and if they don't, then they basically lash out at them. I can see how that could happen. Part of what he was saying was, you know, at times when they wanted privacy or they just did not want their picture taken, you know, or whatever, then it was met with, oh, okay, you're not going to give us what we want. We're going to print awful things about you and your wife. You know, it was all right. I would say it was like a 3. I especially don't like to rate memoirs because, again, like I said, that's just that person's story. It was entertaining. There were parts where I was a little bored. Like he really goes into his entire childhood when he's in his teens, his 20s, going away to boarding school, going to war, all these things. And it was interesting, but sometimes I felt like it kind of dragged on a little bit. I would say if you have any interest at all in the royal family and the workings of the royal family, listen to the audiobook. And yes, you've already heard, there are a lot of cringy moments. May very well have happened and been true. I don't know if they had to make it into the book necessarily. Okay, so now I'm going to be talking about my February TBR. Now, as of today, when I'm filming this, it's already February 4th. I have actually already started reading some of my TBR for the month. I'm going to talk about the 2 books that I'm about halfway through one and about, I don't know, a quarter, if that, through another one. But I'm finally tackling Brandon Sanderson, any Brandon Sanderson book. This is my very first time reading Brandon Sanderson. So I'm reading the Stormlight Archive, book 1, The Way of Kings. And like I said, I'm actually at page 185, so not very far at all. But yes, so there's not much to say. If you are at all to anything that has to do with books and reading, then I know you have heard of Brandon Sanderson and this series. My son, he's already read all these books and he loved them as well, and he's been telling me like, you should read them, you should read them. And I always had an intention to read them, but I knew it was going to be a commitment, and I was finally ready to do it. So I am reading it. I'm taking my time. Honestly, I mean, I'm hoping I'll have it done by the end of the month, which might be like overkill, but I'm really taking it slow. I do want to enjoy it. I don't want it to feel like homework, and I am enjoying it. I'm still so early on in the book that it's still a lot of world building and getting to know characters and stuff simultaneously as I'm reading this, because especially if I'm reading a longer book, I just still want to read other books at the same time. And I know that's not everybody's thing, but I'm currently also reading Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. I have this taken out from the library, and I actually just started reading it yesterday. I'm almost halfway through the book, and I'm enjoying it. This is one of those books that I've just heard a couple people talk about, and I guess the big thing about this book is it even says at the end why, okay, it says, or at the back, not at the end. It doesn't really give a synopsis at the back, so, but it says, why is everyone talking about the ending of Behind Her Eyes? Which is the thing that I kept hearing anytime I heard people talk about this book, was apparently it's like a blow your mind ending. So we shall see. I almost feel like, am I setting myself up to be disappointed? You have these two women. One of them is like a single mom with a kid. Another one is married to he's like a psychologist. You start to see how their lives are intertwined, and there's some weird things when you are in the head of the psychologist's wife's brain. There's some like questionable things going on, thoughts she's having and stuff that I'm still trying to piece together. There also seems to be some possible trouble in their marriage, and this other woman and how she's involved with the two of them and things like that. So I don't want to give away too much, and I also don't know yet where this is headed, so I'm sure I'll finish this like within the next day or two. And the next book that I have on my February TBR is Unravel Me by Tahira Mafi. I read the first, this is the Shatter Me series, and I read the first one, Shatter Me. I believe this is young adult, so it's really easy to read, and I flew through the first one, but I did enjoy it enough that I thought I would want to continue the series. Along with that, I'd also like to get to Lessons in Chemistry. I have had this, I know this is like super popular book. This has been everywhere. I believe this won one of the, was it the Goodreads Choice Awards, I think, for last year. I've actually had this pretty much since it came out. So it's been sitting on my shelf for a long time, and I just never got to it. Heard nothing but good things about it. It takes place in the 1960s, and there's this lady, Elizabeth. She is involved in a whole STEM situation, but obviously because of the time that it's taking place in, it's not as common to have women involved in that kind of stuff. So I think it just kind of follows her experience, and that she's kind of breaking down barriers of women being in STEM. I'm looking forward to reading that. And the next book I have is Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. This is another book that I heard about from Books and Lala, and I haven't really heard anybody else talk about it, so I don't know if I would have come across it if it wasn't for her. I don't know much about it. I know that it takes place in the cold. I live in Canada, and so since February started, it has been nothing but cold and snow. Currently it's like -25 outside. There's snow everywhere, and I'm over it. But that being said, I thought this would be the perfect time to read a book like this, because it is all about the snow and the cold. The little just blurb in the back says, filled with suspense and surprises, parceled out so tantalizing that it took discipline, willpower to keep from skipping down each page to see what happens. That's all I know. We shall see. And then the last two books that I have on my TBR is the second installment of the Finlay Donovan series. Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead. This would be considered a cozy mystery. I read the first one, which is Finlay Donovan is Killing It. I totally love that book. There is murder involved in the lightest way possible, and funny, not that the murder is funny, but Finlay Donovan as a character is just, she's just aloof in a lot of ways. And basically the premise is that she accidentally gets hired as like a hit woman when she's talking to her publicist, or I think at a publicist, they're out to lunch, and she's talking about the premise for her next book. Someone overhearing at the other table thinks that she's talking about what she does for a living, which is like hit woman. And so she gets approached. You find all this out really early in the first book. She gets approached to basically do a hit on somebody, and it just spirals from there. It's just craziness. I don't know. I've heard people rave about it, so I'm excited about that. And the last book I have for February, it wouldn't be a complete February/Valentine's Day month without throwing in some Colleen Hoover. I have reminders of him by Colleen Hoover. I know there's going to be some sadness in here because there always is, but this one's a little different because as far as I know, it's more about a mom and a son. I don't know if there's like a romantic plot. The main thing I can see from the back, it says a young mother fights to earn a place in her child's life, but is there room for her? That is it. That is my February TBR. I might not get to all of these books, and I may change my mind. I may switch things around, and we will find out if I do a February wrap up. So on that note, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, if you're new, I would love it if you would subscribe if you enjoy bookish content. You can follow me actually on Instagram as well. My handle there is Books and the Modern Girl. I hope you guys are all doing well. I'd love to know what some of your February TBR reads are going to be, and if you've already started on that, how many books you have planned for the month, all the things I would love to know. And I will see you guys next time.